Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Class 70, where we are dealing with the second class on the 7 major works in the Fountain of Wisdom, that volume of works written after the Kitab, revealed after the Kitab-i-Aqdas. We are, now hold on just a second. Alex is not here, so I'm going to have to admit the people who are in the waiting room, and so I'm going to be going back and forth here. The first class we dealt with completed 2 and got into a third work of those 7, and of course we had dealt with some of the other works in a prior class. The other works we will deal with from the same volume will wait until after we studied an epistle to the son of the wolf, which I really look forward to, because in preparing for this class, I found a number of things that I was not aware of or had forgotten about. It had been a long time since I'd studied the work, so I look forward to that. That'll be the next class, Epistle to the Son of the Wolf. Then after that, we'll deal with the other 2 works in this volume that are particularly relevant to the covenant and the transfer of guidance from Bahá'u'lláh when he passes to Abdu'l-Bahá, and that is the Tablet of Carmel and the Kitab-i-Aqdas, the Book of My Covenant. So tonight we will pick up where we left off. We had gotten a little bit into the Lawh-i-Maqsúd, so let me share my screen. Themes of major works revealed after the Aqdas Part 2. It says class 69. It should say class 70. I'll fix that. The Tablet of Maqsud, or the Lawh-i-Maqsúd, we dealt with the first 2 slides, and one of them was this beautiful quote that, as I said, many of you have no doubt encountered in many other places. It's so often quoted. It's about the middle of Gleanings. Man is the supreme talisman. And it talks about how this beautiful image of we are like a mine rich in gems of inestimable value, but the gems must be mined and polished and refined. And so this is done by education. So the second slide we got into, and where he acknowledges the letter that Maqsud had sent, and praises him for asking the questions he asked. And as you remember last time, I talked about how so many of the revealed works are in response to questions. And he praises those who ask them, not only because they're important questions, because, as I said last time, the answers are provided not just to the inquirer, but to all mankind benefits from it. So first he portrays the condition of the world. The tabernacle of unity hath been raised. Regard ye not one another as strangers, ye are the fruits of one tree, the leaves of one branch. Very famous quote there. He then indicates how the spiritual reality will become manifest in a social edifice, a social reality, and he quotes one of the passages from the Lawh-i-Maqsúd, says, "The great being saith, the structure of the world's stability and order hath been reared upon and will continue to be sustained by the twin pillars of reward and punishment." Now, if you recall, we have come across similar statements about the importance of reward and punishment in so many tablets. And of course, just what he means by these terms is well worth several classes on their own. And in another connection, he hath uttered the following in the eloquent tongue: "Justice hath a mighty force at its command. It is none other than reward and punishment for the deeds of men. By the power of this force, the tabernacle of order is established throughout the world, causing the wicked to restrain their natures for fear of punishment." And of course, you could apply this as well to what we find also repeatedly in the writings, and that is the concept of the value of the fear of God. which sounds so negative in the context of other religions that the Old Testament, for example, you really do kind of fear that God. But the fear of God doesn't mean the fear that God will do something capricious or inappropriate or unjust, but the fear that our own actions, our free will, results in consequences. And that would be reward for the things we do well in service to humankind and to the cause of Bahá'u'lláh and his words, and some sort of retribution, if not in this life, in the afterlife, though we don't know exactly what that is. There are various passages in the Baha'i writings that talk about that, and we can get at that sometime in the Q&A today or later in another class. So the fear of God is what this alludes to on the individual level. We can presume this applies to humankind collectively, as well as to those individuals who then and now are the stirrers of sedition and the cause of division, dissent, destruction, and merciless slaughter. That's not from the tablet. That's my own observation. He then implies that soon sheer necessity will bring about conditions where the establishment of the lesser peace will be the only avenue for human survival. Now, I've talked about this in a number of individual talks about the pandemic and the various other worldwide problems we face. Surely this following statement about collective security is being realized now, and I give the examples of the United Nations, of course, was such an effort, the League of Nations before that, NATO, the European Union, ideas of collective security among like-minded nations. So again, this is not from the tablet. This is a prefatory to this statement that Baha'u'lláh makes about how the lesser peace will come about. And basically he says it will be by necessity, not because of the change in the hearts of humankind. And this is important to realize. The time must come when the imperative necessity for the holding of a vast and all-embracing assemblage of men will be universally realized. The rulers and kings of the earth must needs attend it, and participating in its deliberations must consider such ways and means as will lay the foundations of the world's great peace among men. Such a peace demandeth that the great powers should resolve for the sake of the tranquility of the peoples of the earth to be fully reconciled among themselves. And now he goes to the discussion of collective security or collective justice. Should any king take up arms against another, all should unitedly arise and prevent him. If this be done, the nations of the world will no longer require any armaments except for the purpose of preserving the security of their realms and maintaining internal order within their territories. This will ensure the peace and composure of every people, government, and nation. We fain would hope that the kings and rulers of the earth, the mirrors of the gracious and almighty name of God, may attain unto this station and shield mankind from the onslaught of tyranny. He then turns to a sequence of other indices of and necessities for establishing peace, justice, and unity, all of which began with this phrase, the great being saith. And of course, it's Baha'u'lláh who's saying it, but the implication is this is what God inspires him to say. This is another thing we can take up at a later time, and that is what the manifestations do that, insofar as what part they play in the revelatory act. Are they simply rehearsing or repeating what God tells them to say? Or are they being inspired to say, speak on a subject and the words of their own? So the universal language and common script. Again, this you'll find this tablet, as with some of the others that we've dealt with in this same volume, repeat many of the things that are, of course, in the Aqdas, but expand on them. Until men recognize and heed the advice of the pen of glory, the earth will be tormented by a fresh calamity every day, and unprecedented commotions will break out. It feels like he's describing this very time, does it not? It's very powerful and very appropriate to every time we dare look at the news each morning. Statesmanship and the world government require that every ruler to weigh his own being every day in the balance of equity and justice, and then to judge between men and counsel them to do that which would direct their steps unto the path of wisdom and understanding. This is the cornerstone of statesmanship and the essence thereof. What's interesting here is, as I say in the little afternote, it is interesting that this is a religious text discussing the practical exigencies of a properly functioning political institutions. Again, something so important and relevant to our what seems to be the deterioration of a system that seemed up until the last decade or so fairly rigorous and well-founded. And yet you'll find in the letters of the Guardian, he has very insightful statements to make about the United States and the problems or flaws in the United States, the government of the United States. Primarily, he's talking about materialism. But this first part of this, every ruler to weigh his own being every day, reminds you, of course, of the hidden word, bring thyself into account each day ere thou art summoned to a reckoning. So if the statesman would do that and act accordingly, that they would bring about important counsel. And it also is a reminder of that hidden word that says, where Bahá'u'lláh says, I will not forgive the injustice of any man. And of course, that applies to every one of us as well as these statements. And what does he mean by that? In other words, does that mean that anyone who commits injustice is doomed and condemned, or does it simply mean that there will be some recompense in the afterlife? And then finally, the earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. And then he focuses on consultation and compassion. The acquisition of knowledge is another subject in this, the Lawh-i-Maqsúd. The learned of the day must direct the people to acquire those branches of knowledge which are of use, that both the learned themselves and the generality of mankind may derive benefits therefrom. Such academic pursuits as begin and end with words alone have never been and never will be of any worth. And we read that before in another tablet. It's very powerful. Again, as I said previously, it's sort of up to us to decide which of those arenas of scholarly endeavor seem just to be functions that have no fruit, that bear no fruit, that are simply begin and end with words. Moderation, another thing he brings up in the Lawh-i-Maqsúd. Consider, for instance, such things as liberty, civilization, and the like. However much men of understanding may favorably regard them, they will, if carried to excess, exercise a pernicious influence upon men. Now, this is a passage we see repeated in various other terms often. One that recurs to me that I know it from gleanings, though I'm not sure where, I forget where it is originally, but it talks about how liberty, if carried to excess, will be as a pernicious influence as it would be a felicitous influence if not carried to excess. And of course, liberty, when carried to excess, leads to licentiousness. So, other exhortations and axioms in this same tablet. The man of consummate learning and the sage endowed with penetrating wisdom are the two eyes to the body of mankind. These beautiful axioms, very much like the hidden words. The importance of words. No man of wisdom can demonstrate his knowledge save by means of words. This showeth the significance of the word, as is affirmed in all the scriptures, whether of former times or more recently. And of course, we think immediately of the passage in 1 John, which he brings up later, that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Human utterance is an essence which aspireth to exert its influence and needeth moderation. As to its influence, this is conditional upon refinement, which in turn is dependent upon hearts which are detached and pure. And responding to the second letter, the very personal response, you see, as you remember my talking last week about how this tablet is framed so as if it is being delivered by Mirza Khajan, parts of it. And that becomes obvious here. Now we go to a second tablet for tonight, the fourth out of the 7 we're going to look at, the tablet of Vafa. Here, Baha'u'lláh is responding to a letter from Vafa by answering questions in sequence that Vafa has asked. The first has to do with the return, the second with the worlds of God, the third about the ordinances of God, the fourth about warning Baha'u'lláh gave upon departure from Iraq regarding the birds of darkness, and note, even as Baha'u'llah's tablets are in response to specific questions put to him by believers, so many letters from, many letters from the Universal House of Justice are in responses to concerns and questions put to it by believers and local and national spiritual assemblies. This is important for you to understand, so that if you have questions, that you can put them to the House of Justice and they will respond. And that's amazing that we can ask anything we want and you will get an answer. And I remember some of the collections of, they were all collected together in the compilation of compilations. But there were these various compilations that came out, more than 25 years ago, in little booklet form on education, on marriage, on various subjects. And many of the passages collected in those compilations were answers to particular individuals. In particular, I remember the ones that deal with scholarship, which was very interesting to me, for a number of reasons, but particularly with the Association for Baha'i Studies, many of the questions being answered about who is a true scholar and who is a particularly, you talk about the 2 institutions of the learned and the rulers. And the learned, of course, it doesn't just say learned. In the Aqdas, Baha'u'lláh says the learned in Baha. So it clarifies this collection. What is meant by learned? Does it mean in some sense that you could test a person's acumen or something? And the answer is no. It has to do with understanding of and fidelity to the covenant of Baha'u'lláh. The 5th tablet, a tablet to Siyyid Mihdiy-i-Dahaji, and it may be Dahaji, I don't know. Again, forgive my mispronunciation, but
you said it right.
Oh my goodness!
Dahaji, yes.
Okay, thank you. It is always good to know the context of these tablets, as I said, to whom it is addressed and under what circumstances. As I've cautioned you or admonished you previously many times, before you read a tablet, it's always good to see what the Guardian might have to say about it, what Here's a Day's book might say about the context in which it's revealed, because it offers a lot of insight into the sometimes subtle meaning, in particular this one, because this individual becomes a covenant breaker, even though he had been given the title Siyyid Mihdiy. the name of God Mihdi, and the Mihdi is he who is anointed, or he who is sent, or he is for, and of course, the Mihdi and the Mahdi, as it's sometimes pronounced, and the Qaim. The Mihdi applies usually to Sunni belief about the return of the hidden Imam, and the Qaim does rather, and the Mihdi about the promised one. This letter is about teaching and deepening in the cause, about fidelity to the cause, which is ironic again because of the context, and ends with passages regarding fidelity to the ordinances of God. Now, this is so important that we understand that, well, isn't that strange that with the power in Baha'u'llah's writing, and he's writing specifically to this individual about fidelity, he becomes unfaithful. Does Baha'u'llah foreknow that? And of course, that's a probability that he did. And so one lesson we take individually, in my opinion, from reading this is, oh my goodness, here this individual is being specifically forewarned and he ignores it. Am I doing the same thing? So you see how free will is such an important ingredient in the plan of God, insofar as the manifestations are concerned. First, regarding the Kitabi Aqdas, bless those who peruse it, bless those who apprehend it, blessed those who meditate upon it, blessed those who ponder its meaning. So vast is its range that it hath encompassed all men ere the recognition of it. Ere long will its sovereign power, its pervasive influence, and the greatness of its might be manifested on earth. Verily thy God is the all-knowing, the all-informed. Then even more ironically, he states in this same tablet, O my name, hearken thou unto my voice coming from the direction of my throne. He wisheth to make mention of thy name at all times, inasmuch as thou hast proved thyself steadfast in extolling his virtues amongst men. Indeed, thy Lord loveth fidelity, as found in the realm of creation, and he hath given it precedence over the most praiseworthy qualities. Verily, he is potent and powerful. Again, such irony that you've done so well, keep up the good work, and he's not going to do it. Finally, and still more ironically, Baha'u'llah demonstrates his station by alluding to the prayer that the Sayyid has uttered. Great indeed is the blessedness awaiting thee, inasmuch as thou hast curtailed thine own affairs in favor of this inviolable, this mighty and enlightened cause. In short, and this is my own words, of course, he seizes upon the righteous acts of that the Sayyid has done after forewarning him of the temptations to violate that guidance as a means of encouraging him in this path, thereby demonstrating that Baha'u'llah will ever be aware of his true motive in all he does, even as he is aware of our own motives. Let me take a sip of my tea. All right, this is the sixth, next to last tablet we will discuss tonight. A very important one, the tablet of the proof, the Lawh-i-Burhún. This is an emotionally charged tablet of power, recrimination, and defiance against one of the most ruthless of those who persecuted the Baha'is, Sheikh Mohammed Baqir, the wolf. And if you remember, we will read the epistle to the son of the wolf, the son of this individual, the father of Sheikh Mohammed Taqi Makafi, the son of the wolf, to whom epistle to the son of the wolf is addressed. This tablet was revealed after the martyrdom of the king of the martyrs and the beloved of the martyrs. As I may have mentioned, but may not, these two individuals were executed in a horrible fashion, and executed because the wolf, as it were, owed them money. And so rather than pay them, he thought it most expedient to have them declared as Babis or Baha'is and killed. And while epistolary in genre, that is in the form of a letter, this is also a highly structured argument and an indictment that applies not solely to the wolf, but to all like him at the time and all who have followed and behaved in a similar fashion, including those in this day. And of course, this day, as we talked about class before last, where we said prayers for the present persecutions that are sweeping across Iran of the Baha'is. This applies to them, certainly. These are the two individuals, they're brothers, the king of the martyrs on the left and the beloved of the martyrs on the right, Mirza Muhammad Hussein and Hassan, who of course the names of two of the imams who were sons of Muhammad, or sons of Ali. I forget, I think they're sons of Ali. And of course, Hussein is a very important name because the Imam Hussein was slaughtered in Karbala, the plains of Karbala. And Mirza Hussein Ali, the name that Bahá'u'lláh is given, combines both the name of Hussein, the Imam Hussein, and the one who is meant to be the first Imam, though he was the fourth Imam, and that's Ali. In Isfahan, Mullah Kazim was beheaded by order of Sheikh Mohammed Bakir, and a horse made to gallop over his corpse, which was then delivered to the flames, while Siyyid Aqdas had his ears cut off and was led by a halter through the streets and bazaars. A month later occurred in that same city the tragedy of the two famous brothers, and these are the twin shining lights, Mirza Muhammad Hassan and Mirza Muhammad Hussein, respectively surnamed the King of Martyrs and the Beloved of Martyrs, who were celebrated for their generosity, trustworthiness, kindliness, and piety. Their martyrdom was instigated by the wicked and dishonest Mir Muhammad Hussein, the Imam Jume, stigmatized by Baha'u'lláh as the she-serpent, and this individual is mentioned in the epistle to the son of the wolf, who in view of a large debt he had incurred in his transactions with them, schemed to nullify his obligations by denouncing them as Babis and thereby encompassing their death. Their richly furnished houses were plundered, even to the trees and flowers in their gardens. All their remaining possessions were confiscated. Sheikh Mohammed Bakir, denounced by Baha'u'lláh as the wolf, pronounced their death sentence. The Zilu Sultan ratified the decision, after which they were put in chains, decapitated, dragged to the Maidan-i-Ishaq, and there exposed to the indignities heaped upon them by a degraded and rapacious populace. In such wise, Abdu'l-Bahá has written, was the blood of these two brothers shed, that the Christian priest of Julfa cried out, lamented, and wept on that day. For several years, Baha'u'lláh in his tablets continued to make mention of them, to voice his grief over their passing, and to extol their virtues. That's from Shoghi Effendi's comment on this tablet and on these two individuals. O Bakir, thou hast pronounced sentence against them for whom the books of the world have wept, and whose favor the scriptures of all religions have testified. Thou art gone far astray, art indeed wrapped in a thick veil. By God himself thou hast pronounced judgment against them, through whom the horizon of faith hath been illumined. Unto this bear witness, they who are the dawning places of revelation and the manifestations of the cause of thy Lord, the most merciful, who have sacrificed their souls and all they possessed in his path, his straight path. The faith of God hath cried everywhere by reason of thy tyranny, and yet thou disportest thyself, and art of them that exult. And this is so powerful again, speaking against the wolf. the part that I highlight, and I'll read that now. And yet Baha'u'lláh says with words of utmost power and wrenching clarity, there is no hatred in my heart for thee, nor for anyone. Every man of learning beholdeth thee, and such as are like thee engulfed in evident folly. And this is the part that just really is astounding. Hadst thou realized that which thou hast done, in other words, if you really understood, as you will, presumably in the afterlife, thou wouldst have cast thyself into the fire, or abandoned thine home and fled into the mountains, or wouldst have groaned until thou hadst returned into the place destined for thee by him who is the Lord of strength and of might, O thou who art even as nothing. Oh, I love that last part. If someone has their microphone on, please mute yourself. Rend thou asunder the veils of idle fancies and vain imaginings, that thou mayest behold the day star of knowledge shining from this resplendent horizon. Thou hast torn in pieces a remnant of the prophet himself, and imagined that thou hast helped the faith of God. Thus hath thy soul prompted thee, and thou art truly one of the heedless. Thine act hath consumed the hearts of the concourse on high, and those of such as had circled round the cause of God, the Lord of the worlds. The soul of the chaste one melted by reason of thy cruelty, and the inmates of paradise wept sore in that blessed spot. This is so powerful. I don't need to say that, but because it's so obvious, but it's amazing. The clear implication is that in the afterlife, he will realize what he has done and will lament that which he has done, both to these victims and to himself. And notice the epithets that Baha'u'lláh uses to address him. Thou who hast gone astray, O foolish one, thou who hast turned away from God. By God, troubles have failed to unnerve me, and the repudiation of the divines hath been powerless to weaken me. Hath leadership made thee proud? Peruse thou what God hath revealed to the sovereign rule of the Sultan of Turkey. And take note of it, because by this time the Sultan of Turkey had died. Peruse thou the Katabigan, and that which the All-Merciful have sent down unto thee, into the king of Paris, who also is deceased, if not at this point, but shortly thereafter. Read aloud, read and call thou to mind that which was said of old by a believer of thy stock. Will ye slay a man because he aideth, that should be, my Lord, saith, that should be, my Lord is God. When he hath already come to you with signs from your Lord, this is from the Quran. Hath the Shah been informed and chose to close his eyes to thine acts? Or hath he been seized with fear at the howling of a pack of wolves who have cast the path of God behind their backs and followed in the way without any clear proof or book? Bakir, rely not on thy glory and thy power. Thou art even as the last trace. Here's a beautiful image. Thou art even as the last trace of sunlight upon the mountaintop. Soon will it fade away as decreed by God, the all-possessing, the Most High. And then what follows is the ubi sunt theme Baha'u'lláh so often employed in his epistles to the proud and the powerful rulers of his day, though they apply to anyone in power or seeking power, or the tribal version of the life after death. And that ubi sunt, again, is a Latin phrase from a poetry tradition all the way back to the classical period, which means, where are those who were before us? And the sense of it is, if you think you have power or you think you're impervious to retribution, look back on those who were powerful before you. Where are they? And the answer is, of course, they're in their graves. So no power will deter the ultimate consequence of your actions. Consider the Sultan of Turkey. He did not want war, but those like you desired it. When its fires were enkindled and its flames rose high, the government and the people were thereby weakened. Then in the final paragraph, a sudden break as the Holy Spirit, as in the Lawh-i-Hikmat and elsewhere, directs Baha'u'lláh to cease trying to admonish the wolf and turn instead to the she-serpent, whom Baha'u'lláh addresses in a most powerful passage of condemnation, drawing on comparisons to acts done to the prophets down through the ages, Hud, Salih, Christ, and so on. And if you're not familiar with Hud and Salih, they are manifestations in the Abrahamic line who precede Christ, and they are mentioned in the Quran, particularly in the Surah of Hud, and they're also mentioned by Baha'u'lláh in the beginning of the Kitab-i-Igan, where he says that the reason people have failed to recognize the manifestations is because of were misled by the clerics of the prior revelation. And he gives the examples of Hud and Salih among the others. Epithets employed in this lengthy paragraph for Mir Muhammad Hussein. Again, incredible rhetorical power in this passage, such outrages muted by assurance of the ultimate failure of the faithless and the ascendancy of the righteous. The she-serpent, O heedless outcast, O thou who hast joined partners with God, O heedless one, O perverse hater, O ignorant one that hast been shut out as by a veil from God. All right. We will finish up tonight then with the last tablet of these 7 I have chosen to, well, it's just the 7 other than the ones that we will look at in class after next, and the ones we have already looked at that were list, if you will, of some of the laws from the Aqdas, which he expands on. The tablet of Ba. This is a touching, it's really an amazing thing. It's a love letter to Abdu'l-Bahá from his father. And it's a tablet to the land of Ba, which is, as you will see, Abdu'l-Bahá had taken a journey north to Lebanon, not Lebanon, mine just went blank. To Beirut. Thank you. Thank you. I just went blank on it. A demonstration of the incredible love, intimacy, and affection and closeness of Baha'u'lláh as a father with his beloved and trusted son, Abdu'l-Bahá, whom he addressed as the apple of mine eye. So you don't think of Baha'u'lláh with this stern voice that we see in these tablets. I don't know, it just seems, it doesn't seem incongruous, but it shows us a side of Baha'u'lláh that we do not often see. And it gives you some inclination or some indication of the extreme love that passed between them. There's, of course, the story that's told often about Tahirzadeh, and I've mentioned this in a previous class, who Samandari Tahirzadeh, who excuse me, Tarazallah Samandari handed the cause, who at I think about the age of 16 or so was able to attain the presence of Baha'u'lláh. But as with everyone who met Baha'u'lláh when he was at Baji, they had to meet Abdu'l-Bahá first so he could vet them, if you will, ascertain their intentions, and then also find a time when it was convenient for Baha'u'lláh. And when he was in the presence of Baha'u'lláh, he said, "Oh, I've been waiting so long and so anxiously to see you." And he says, have you not been with Abdu'l-Bahá? And he said, "Yes." And then you have been with me. He it was who in several tablets which Baha'u'lláh himself had penned, had been personally addressed as the apple of mine eye, and had been referred to as a shield unto all who are in heaven and on earth, as a shelter for all mankind, and a stronghold for whosoever hath believed in God. It was on his behalf that his father, in a prayer revealed in his honor, had supplicated God to render him victorious, and to ordain for him, as well as for them that love thee, the things destined by the Almighty for his messengers and the trustees of his revelation. And finally, in yet another tablet, these weighty words had been recorded. The glory of God rest upon thee and upon whosoever serveth thee and circleth round thee. Woe, great woe betide him that opposeth and injureth thee. Well is it with him that sweareth fealty to thee. The fire of hell torment him who is thine enemy, or thy enemy. This tablet is a letter dictated by Baha'u'lláh and addressed by Mirza Khajan, his amanuensis, to Baha'u'lláh, while the latter was on a visit to Beirut. The last paragraph demonstrates the mighty station that Baha'u'lláh knew his son occupied, written almost as if Abdu'l-Bahá is one before whom Baha'u'lláh himself is humbled. Blessed, doubly blessed is the ground which his footsteps have trodden, the eye that hath been cheered by the beauty of his countenance, the ear that hath been honored by hearkening to his call, the heart that hath tasted the sweetness of his love, the breast that hath dilated through his remembrance, the pen that hath voiced his praise, the scroll that hath borne the testimony of his writings. We beseech God, blessed and exalted be he, that he may honor us with meeting him soon. He is in truth the all-hearing, the all-powerful, he who is ready to answer. The amazing capacity of Abdu'l-Bahá. And this is just my own observation, and we will deal with this more when we talk about the passing of Baha'u'lláh and the actions that took place in the ministry of Abdu'l-Bahá. He was his philosophical writings are just amazing, as theological writings as well. If you look at Some Answered Questions, as I've said, it's a virtual cryptic encyclopedia of theological and philosophical questions, the most forthright ones anyone could think of to ask. The tablet to Auguste Forel is another very important tablet. Here he deals with the question of determinism and free will. The commentary on the Hadith of the Hidden Treasure. This is not authoritatively translated, but a very good translation is available online, as is the Lawh-i-Flaki, the Tablet of the Universe, and the Divine Art of Civilization. I can discuss what those are, and we will at a later time. One of the main things that's incredibly interesting is how young Abdu'l-Bahá was when he was in his teens when he wrote the commentary on the Hadith of the Hidden Treasure. Political and leadership skills, dealing with the covenant breakers. He was incredibly deft with dealing with them. We'll go through that. If you have taken Book 8 of the Rui sequence, you've gotten into some of that, but it's remarkable story. His journey to the West and what that accomplished. He gave in the course of that journey almost 400 talks. His letters to individuals and communities, particularly LSAs, regarding how to consult, what qualities and attributes were needed in this most important skill. He was the architect of the world order of Baha'u'lláh in the sense that, and I've given a talk on this and we'll talk about it again, in the Will and Testament, he creates the institution of the Hands of the Cause, even though Hands of the Cause had already been designated by Baha'u'lláh. He creates the institution and how it will function. He creates the National Spiritual Assembly as a second tier in the three-tiered electoral process. And he creates that electoral process. So the National Assemblies become the pillars that uphold or elect the House of Justice. And he delineates of course, the guardianship. He creates the guardianship, even though it is hinted at in the Aqdas. He creates it and delineates the duties for that institution. How the guardian will be appointed, what the parameters of the authority of the guardianship are, and of the Universal House of Justice as well. He is the perfect exemplar. These are some of the titles. The mystery of God, the chosen title of Abdu'l-Bahá was Abdu'l-Bahá, so as to refute. And of course, Abdu'l-Bahá means Abd, servant, Allah of Baha, servant of his father, or the servant of God. You can translate it either way. So as to refute spurious assertions by enemies of the cause or of him that he was claiming to be a manifestation. And so if your name is, I am the one who was beneath the manifestation, it's hard to say that, well, you're claiming to be on a par with a manifestation. All right. We left ourselves enough time for some decent consultation. So let me stop sharing.